My name is Kristen. I'm the Director of Operations here at GMI. I'd like to welcome everybody to tonight's roundtable, where we're going to focus on how to handle career change. We'll spend about an hour discussing this topic. As a reminder, this call will be recorded and made available to our YouTube channel after the fact. We're joined today by two repeat GMI mentors, Rachel and Leanne. I'll have them introduce themselves, share a bit about their journey, and then we'll move into the questions that were submitted from our mentees. If throughout the meeting you have any additional questions about career change, please feel free to type them in and we'll get to them. Rachel, would you like to start by introducing yourself?
Sure. Yeah, thank you for having me. My name is Rachel Marie. Marie is my last name. That's often confusing to people. Yeah, I've done the GMI mentorship 2 times now. I've really enjoyed it. My career journey to this point has been real diverse. It's a winding journey, and I feel like I've changed career paths a few times, actually. Staying home with children for 2 years after each of 3 children has been a real influence on my career. And over time, I've had jobs like assistant division manager, branch manager, administrator, really focused on functional business units, but it was always hard to describe exactly what I did because I wore a lot of hats. So in 2019, I started doing business consultation, went back to school at 40 to get my MBA. Around that time, I met with a career therapist and discovered that the name for what I've been doing for my whole career was organizational development. So that was new to me. I didn't know of that term before. And since then, I dove into organizational development, carved out a more specific niche in workplace development, and now focus on that area of consultation. I also started this January as an instructor at Portland State University, teaching organizational behavior part-time. And my next step is launching a consultancy group that really offers advisory services and cross-functional support to small to mid-sized businesses. So that's where I'm at now.
Thank you. Leanne?
Hi, I'm Leanne White. I'm currently a senior manager at DocuSign. I've done 2 mentorships with GMI, so that's how I connected with this group. And like Rachel, my career's been varied. I started in banking, which I kind of fell into because I had friends that worked at a bank. So I started out in student loans and then worked my way up to being a personal banker on the phone. And then eventually in investing. So 20 plus years in financial services, and eventually into management. It's interesting. That was a later part of my career. If you would have told me in my 20s that I would manage people, I'd be like, no way, So it's really an exercise in learning patience and what you want to do. And especially as someone who'd been in support roles, I was the person that was on the phones, and now I'm kind of managing the people that work cases and that. And about, tomorrow it'll be 8 years. I've been at DocuSign for 8 years, and I made that switch mostly because, in financial services, especially in the Seattle area, a lot of places have moved out. Like my last role, I was 10 years at Capital One. It was a startup that was acquired twice, and the last owner was Capital One. And it's just expensive to have, the services in Seattle. So they moved my role to Texas, and I chose to not move with it. And I looked at, where can I take these skills? Now I've developed leadership skills and management skills and take it into a new industry. So that's how I ended up at DocuSign, and first managing a technical support team and now a sales support team.
Thank you both for sharing. We're going to move into the questions. And the first main question, which I think I know the answer to, is, are you currently working in a field unrelated to your college major? Leanne?
I am not. I actually, Rachel mentioned she went back to school. I did that in my 30s, and I went back and got a degree in social science. The interesting part is it is very transferable because, kind of the study of people and how they interact in that, it really does help in the workforce. And last year I went back and I got my MBA, so in executive leadership. So I am a huge proponent of any sort of schooling, because just that critical thinking and how you work through things. But as with many people, you don't want to know what you are going to end up doing when you're younger. So you end up making it fit how you can.
Rachel?
Yeah, well, it sounds like Leanne and I have some things in common. So my undergrad was in communication studies, and so while I'm not holding a position that's specific to that industry, that area, it's helped so much with everything. So it's relevant, and then of course the MBA is more relevant to what I'm doing now. And Leanne, I don't know if you went through this, but there were a lot of very young people in my MBA program. And I wonder to myself, I think it's not a horrible thing to wait a little bit longer and then go back and have more context too. So I think there's nothing wrong with that, waiting until later.
Yeah, exactly. I found I was probably a better student when I had to also have a mortgage and work full time while going to school. I think I appreciated it a lot more than I did when I was younger, for sure.
The next question is, was there a specific moment that you can pinpoint when you knew you wanted a career change? Rachel?
There have been so this is an interesting question because first off, I've shifted a few times throughout my career anyway, but really in my late 30s, there were moments that led up to realizing I want to focus more intentionally on a specific career path. And then once I went through the process of after that career therapist, knowing that I want to dive in now and name it organizational development, that's what I've been doing. Now I'm going to name it that. And that overlaps heavily with HR. And so that's the main thing that I decided is I'm going to, I think it was during the MBA program is when I really decided, now I'm going to hone in now and make a definite switch and really embrace that and move forward in that direction.
And Leanne, you had mentioned part of your switch was the job moved, but was there anything else along those lines?
Yeah, I would say earlier in my career, even when I was, working support roles, if you would have asked me earlier, I liked being an individual contributor. I think the best way to describe it is when you're good at what you do, you get to be the rock star. And then making that move to management, it's a conscious shift because you're not a rock star anymore. You're building rock stars and you're supporting and helping removing barriers for them. So it's a very definite switch in mindset. And most people that I coach tend to look at it as kind of this linear career path, like, oh, I want to be a manager because that's the next step up. But I do have those conversations of you have to be sure you really want to do it because you're going to be a life coach. You're going to be mean mommy, you're going to be their best friend or their worst enemy. And you have to be okay with that. And so for me, it was this conscious shift from being an IC and just working on like, I do my stuff and I leave at the end of the day to leadership.
Along those lines, once you sort of pinpointed, okay, here's what it is, we're making this change. Was it a very hard decision to decide to like make that move? Because it's always kind of easy to understand like, okay, I'm not happy anymore. But then like to actually put that into action, was that a very hard decision? Leanne?
The one when I made the move where it was a totally different industry, it wasn't as hard because it's like, okay, I worked at Bank of America and was laid off there. And then I worked at another company and I had long stretches, but I was like, it's time to do something different. So that was less hard. But it's also, there's a little bit of fear and going into the unknown and really looking at, things are interesting to me, but is that progressing me? So I will say, especially when I moved into a leadership role, the first couple months, there was a lot of failure. And for me, like, that was really difficult. Like I am a person that likes to do things right and do them well. But I also will say some of my biggest growth was in those periods where I had a bit of failure. So I learned how to accept that, move on from it, learn from it. So looking for those opportunities to stretch yourself and be a little uncomfortable is always a good thing, but a scary thing as well, for sure.
Rachel?
I really like Leanne's answer, that that discomfort, and the growth that comes with it. And I think so the question too, was it a hard decision? By the time I made the decision, it wasn't hard. I think it was the hardest part was knowing which direction to go and deciding which direction I was going to take. And I would say the other hard decision was working for myself rather than an employer. That was really tough. Now, I wouldn't go back and change it now at all. But at the time, of course, I was filled with some self-doubt and wondering if at that age, by that point, I was, I was past 40. And now thinking about it, I think 40 is so young. What was I thinking? That's not old. But there's that again, the self-doubt that creeps in. So yeah.
Were there some fears or uncertainties that you really had to overcome, and how did you? Leanne, you sort of started mentioning that with some fears that you had going into the change. Was there anything else along those lines?
Just really trying to say, is this sustainable? And even some of the stuff I had when I was making the move to more leadership, there were also opportunities to go into places like product management and that, where I would still be an individual contributor. And I really had to take stock. So it was less fear, but more looking at, am I doing this because I really want to do it? And am I going to be happy doing this? Or am I doing it because of fear and I want a transferable skill that's just going to be okay to do for long term? So I think in any role I go into, I want to find a good mix of, something that's sustainable and going to be like a little bit of stability in it, but also something that I enjoy doing.
Rachel?
Yeah, this question reminds me again, there were these two different things that I was worried about. One was working for myself. One was going into an area that overlaps so heavily with HR, and I didn't have a previous HR job title, although I had done, a lot of my work overlapped heavily with it. So one of my biggest fears was that, there seems to be this typical trajectory that we think people must have in order to be successful, that they have gone to the right school and then taken the right degree, and then they have this years of experience with the right job titles and all of that. And there's some truth to that. I mean, there's some truth that people do judge that when you're doing recruiting, that does happen. So my biggest fear was, am I going to be able to get past that and show that these transferable skills relate? Am I going to are people going to think that I'm credible? I mean, these are the real honest, raw fears that I had. Will people trust me? Will they believe me? And I decided to do it anyway. And what I found is that some of those fears are founded, and that you have to push forward and just make it happen anyway.
The next question.
I'd love to expand on something from that sparked something in me. It's one of the things I would advise is not being afraid to take lateral moves at times. Like for me, when I took my first management role, it was a lateral move. And I actually had, one of the people that was a boss, eventually my direct manager, who said like, oh, you're too, like, it's like, using a sledgehammer to put in attack, like you're overskilled for this. And I was like, I see potential in my career growth in this, and I feel it's the right move. And it did eventually lead to more career progression by being willing to, everyone looks at, as Rachel mentioned, like this idea that you continuously move up, but sometimes it's important to move sideways to gain new skills. And I apologize those who didn't hear. I am having to take this from my car.
What steps did you have to take to prepare for your career transition? So once you've made this decision, you're ready to move. What was it that you really had to kind of put into place to make that move? Rachel?
I thought at the time, for a variety of reasons, the next best step for me was getting my MBA. That doesn't mean it's the right step for everyone, but for me, that was the next step. And then as I further realized that my focus is really going to be on workforce or workplace development, I also started learning a lot more specifically on industry trends. I then wrote at least one article that was published in a healthcare journal that helps, and then did some other articles, started doing some consulting specifically on those areas. And also I volunteered. I volunteered in some areas that then led later to other opportunities. So it was anything I could do to really show a portfolio that I can do this.
Leanne?
Yeah, and for me, it was just kind of working through where I wanted to be and how I needed to position myself to take this, because I was looking at it this last change to say, okay, I have significant skills on the management side, and that's what I've focused on like the last 5 years at my previous role. So how do I take that, and especially moving into something that's more technology based, and let them know it's like, hey, I don't need to be highly technical to manage a technical team. And for me, coming to my current role, it worked out well because they had grown a lot of managers within. So they were really looking for people that had management skills to partner with folks coming in. So, folks that were kind of growing up in the company and knew the product, but had to learn the management side. So it was definitely one of those things, like getting ready and making sure that I could answer the questions, and especially when you are managing highly technical people, how do you show value when you're not going to be the one troubleshooting the API? And that's okay. You don't need to be this me. And I think that's another thing of letting go of that, especially as someone who at a previous job had grown up in the ranks. I was still a person that people would come to with all the weird stuff that I used to answer calls about. So there's really learning how to take it higher level and free yourself from kind of being in the weeds on things, for sure.
You touched on something that seems to be a concern with our GMI mentees of the transferable skills. So like you're about to make a career change, but it's always good if you can identify what skills you already have and how they can lead into it. Was there a way that you identified other skills, Leanne, that you knew would like help you transfer into this new career? Or was it sort of like you learned while you were there?
There was a little bit of learning while I was there because I had some really good mentors. So that's another thing, like going through GMI is so important because mentorship's important. I also worked in areas like presenting was a thing that used to just cause me so much anxiety. And I'm more of a free flow thinker. So feeling boxed in, like, okay, I have to present this, and I feel like I have school marm voice. So I sought out mentors that were really good and natural in that space. And then I took every opportunity I could to present and, put myself out there and do that. And then also, like, I will say Capital One's a pretty good company if you're going to get laid off. They did have career counseling for us. So I knew 6 months ahead of time that I was going to, lose my job. And the last 2 months of that were solely just focused on finding a new role. So, and they brought in a company that helped us work through that. So I took advantage of every opportunity to talk about the skills, and really have someone tell me, no, you actually do a lot of this like program management naturally. So you need to hone in on that. And taking, again, those leadership skills and how, just even something as the ability to give feedback and manage up things you don't think about, but how do you continue to work on those skills and get them to where they're valuable to other companies other than just where you're at. Like a lot of people get so focused on, I need to know the industry exactly and this and that, but those skills that kind of go everywhere are the ones that are important, which are a little more intangible, but it's really good to have someone and mentorship to work with you to say, hey, you're really good at this, so you should focus on that area.
And Rachel, how did you identify your transferable skills?
Well, it really helped that I had a career therapist. I only went to her for 2 or 3 sessions, but I guess that's similar to a mentor. And so we were able to literally do an exercise, look back over all of the positions and not just talk about what I did, but what did I do that I really enjoyed doing, and then also back to some supervisors and people that I could go to and say, hey, tell me some of the things that I do well, some of my strengths, because sometimes you're blind to it. You don't know, it might be something that you can't quite put your finger on. And it's those soft skills, like Leanne is talking about, that really are just as important right now as the hard skills. In fact, recent studies are finding that of surveys of employers, one of the complaints among employers who are hiring recent grads is the lack of the soft skill, emotional intelligence areas. So I definitely wouldn't discount coming up with those, leadership, for example, and the ability to grow from constructive criticism, these things that really help. So that's what I did. I went back and I just wrote down all of this, came up with a list of what was transferable, and that's helped not only it helped me also be able to create my own narrative that is really important too, is that story that you can tell.
So once you were in your new career, how did you adapt to that new environment? I think once you kind of make that decision, you identify your transferable skills, and you're now like in this new career that you don't necessarily have the experience backing you up. How did you adapt to your new environment? I think something that a lot of people feel is like imposter syndrome, where I feel like this could kind of come in of like, how do you prove that you are now where you belong? Rachel?
Yeah. Well, so the last thing that you said, that's so relatable. How do you prove? So I've been used to changing environments a lot throughout my career. I've dipped into for short-term projects, et cetera, in many different places. So adaptability is something that I feel strong with, and mainly I go in and I just make sure that I'm listening. That's number one, so that rather than start off by telling everyone what I think I know, about their environment, their culture, but first to listen. And so, in terms of going into these different places quickly, I feel like that's the best way for me to. I come in and I say I'm going to have this period of time where I just observe and I ask questions and I find out the dynamics in your organization, and that helps me to adapt to it. However, all that said, that all sounds nice, right? But the fact is that going into especially more HR focused areas, um, since this is something that I've just recently in the last 3 to 4 years really turned to in a more concrete way, I do find myself having to navigate the fine line between proving myself and also not coming across as egotistical, and it's a line that is hard to navigate sometimes, and I don't have all the answers, but I know that I just try my best to stay up on my knowledge, at the same time stay open and not try to get defensive. I think it's easy to feel defensive when you're already feeling like you have to prove yourself, and so trying to walk that line.
Leanne?
Yeah, and I can say from my end, I learned a lot coming in to my current role because it was a bit of a culture shock. So coming from investing in banking where everything is so regulated and into an environment where people are grade security, and my first thought is like, what bank? Because no, and figuring out how to navigate that, but also um, being authentic to who I am. So I'm not going to come in and be buttoned up and be quiet, but I also have to find ways to, the best way I can put it is to show, not tell, because I can certainly, there's no other way to say it. Leanne explain it all day because I'm not shy of saying what I feel, but how do I, bring it with influence, bring it with data, and be able to show. And plus, I think it's really important in a new environment, as Rachel said, to understand first, because you're not going to change a system or have an opinion about a system until you've actually learned it. And that it's time to suggest change if it makes sense. I'll also say something. I see a lot of people coming in new, their enthusiasm. That sometimes they're bringing up things I'm like, I've talked about this 100 times already. Do you think we've never talked about this before? So I try to keep that perspective myself whenever I come into a new group, going, if I'm thinking of it, they've probably thought of it. So how do I approach this in a way that's constructive and also really affecting change as well in a way that people can be comfortable with? So, but the main thing, if you can take anything away from it, is this idea of just really being authentic to who you are. Because especially for me in banking, I'm not a button-up banker type. So I was able to find places where I could be me, and that's appreciated, because I was never going to be in the role where I'm in a branch in a suit. So
the last question is about networking. And as you both know, as GMI mentors, we do put a lot of emphasis on networking within LinkedIn and just sort of connecting with others. Do you feel that when you were making your transition, were you able to how big of a role did networking play in that when you were making these changes? And if it did, like, what tips would you give someone on how to build their connections in a new field? Rachel?
Yeah, it played a huge role. I think it's appropriate that GMI has that in the curriculum, and it's something that I've focused on with both of the mentors that or the mentees that I've worked with. These days, with applicant tracking systems on the rise and the way that recruiting is done right now, there's an overload of job candidates. And if you're not networking, I think you're definitely at a disadvantage. So this has helped me. What I do, because I'm naturally an introvert, so it's not easy for me to go to big networking events. And I'm not going to throw out, in fact, I don't even have a business card. That's the thing. I'm not going to throw out my business card. So I rely on building those connections on a quality. So I look at quality over quantity, and I try to find people who I'm aligned with in terms of my approach to things, and then also some that I enjoy them, so that we can legitimately and really connect. From there, that has helped me. I've gotten referrals that way. I've been able to help them as well. I mean, it's a two-way street. So to your question, what would you advise, or I think you said, what would you suggest?
Mhm.
I would suggest, for anyone watching right now, I would suggest, because it can be uncomfortable, start with the people that you know and reach out and just let them know what your goal is. Let them know where you're headed, what you're thinking of doing. Just let them know. That's a really good first start. And then just check in with them every so often. See how they're doing. Do you have anything to offer them?
Leanne?
yeah, and also for my Rachel, I'm also an introvert, so it's definitely one of those things that's uncomfortable. But I would say you would be surprised at how willing people are to help. And especially when I was getting out there looking for a role, I know a lot of people through past roles as well as personally. And so I put myself out there to have those conversations. I was up for a role at Amazon, so I reached out to a friend, and he was perfectly willing to do a referral. And again, I was a little hesitant to ask, and he was like, "Oh yeah, of course, I'll totally help you." And I was up for a role at Adidas, and I had a friend who was connected and used to work with somebody who was a senior director there, and he made the connection, was totally happy to speak to me and tell me about the company and how to navigate their interview process. And the role I'm in now is a referral from someone I worked with way back when, and she back in banking, but I hadn't even really talked to her much other than Facebook connections for 15 years, and she was still perfectly willing to do the referral and advocate for me internally. So it's really just building and maintaining those connections, and especially in this environment, like my company's had quite a few layoffs, and I've maintained those relationships with a lot of the people that have left. And there's right now currently 2 people from my former company that have come over, either through referrals from me or through each other. So you never know where these connections will take you. So I tend to continue to check in on people, and especially people I enjoy. I want to know where they're going and what they're doing now, and that's actually enabled me to build a huge network over time, just from being out in the workforce, working with different people, and continuing to keep in touch.
Well, those were the main questions that were submitted. So thank you very much. Are there any parting words or something you feel like we didn't really cover on how to handle your career change? Because I mean, I think most people would say it's sort of a scary process. I mean, finding your first job is scary, let alone trying to find a second one that's kind of different. So do you have any final words of advice or anything? Leanne?
I think for me is it's not being afraid to take the risk. I mean, this job environment, it's a little more difficult, but one of the mentees I had was hesitant to take a role because it wasn't totally aligned with what she was looking to do long term. But I was like, it gets you in. You've been out of the workforce a long time. She was somebody who went back to school after having children. And I was like, long term, you're in. You can show them what you can do. It's in healthcare, so you can move up there and you can see if you like it. And nothing's forever. Like, you don't have to stay if you don't like it. So being okay with that and losing some of the fear, like, I mean, my parents both worked at their jobs for 30 plus years, and that's not the way things are anymore. So not being afraid to take the risk and try something new. I that for me is where I've learned a lot of the things and the different skills. And then I think the only other thing I'll add is in any role you're in, take opportunities to learn new things. Some people hesitate because they're like, oh, it's not my job. It's, oh, I don't want to do stuff I'm not paid for. But for me, I've learned so much. And it's finding the balance, not being taken advantage of it. But, if I'm the person raising my hand to learn a new skill, I can see if I like it, try it out. And then, if it's something I'm interested in, I can go for roles in that in the future. So just putting yourself out there and trying those things.
Rachel?
Yeah, well, I agree with everything Leanne said, and also the little bit of marketing that I've been involved in has shaped the way that I look at this. And so I look at it very much like number one, really figure out what your value add is. What is it that you have to offer, what you want to do. And I think that that's the first step to really clarifying it and then figuring out how to convey it in a way that if you're looking for a specific kind of a job, how to convey it so that it matches with what someone is seeking. So the reason I say this is that I hear a lot of times these complaints about the job market, the complaints about why don't they give me a chance, for example? Why aren't these places? And the reality is that I think the more that you can advocate for yourself and make it easy for the recruiter, for example, to see that, oh, I see this, I see how it relates to this position. And in fact, keep in mind that recruiters are trying to look good too, so the more that you can help a recruiter see that you're a good person for this job, and it's even going to make the recruiter look good because now they're pushing forward a candidate who has really advocated for themselves and almost put sort of a marketing spin on it so that they can show this is how I can help your organization, the better off that you're going to be. So yes, it is a tough job market out there. There are a lot of challenges, and the key is to really hone in on your message and practice it and repeat it.
Well, thank you so much. I know I certainly learned a lot. So thank you both for your time. If anybody has any questions, you can feel free to email me and I can get you the answer. Otherwise, I appreciate both of your times and I hope you have a great rest of your evening.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you.